hit my record on this computer, and here we go. All right. So today we're going to be talking about creating your college resume, and I'm actually show you some resources that we have there that will also be helpful in getting that first draft going.
Great.
All right. So, there's a difference between, first of all, are you both first-year students, or what are your class years?
I'm actually a junior.
Okay. So some of this at the beginning will be a little bit more towards if someone were creating their first resume, but then when I bring you to those resources, there's going to be some good info there, and there's definitely information for you within this. Okay. So we have a junior, and what other class year?
I am a freshman, first year.
Okay, awesome, great. So something for everybody. All right, so, when you are in high school and you put together, that resume, your audience is a little bit different than when you're looking for internships and jobs. So for that high school resume, your audience is college admission offices, guidance counselors, and maybe you've used a resume for a part-time position. But then in college, you're starting to be looking at opportunities for either, on campus where it would be a work-study position. Maybe you're applying for a scholarship of some sort. Any student leader positions usually require resumes. RAs, orientation leaders, all of those types of things, you're going to need a resume. Internships, you definitely want to have a nice polished resume. Employers, of course. Post-grad service organizations, a lot of times students will do a year of service out of Stonehill, but you also need a good resume for that as well. And then a lot of grad school admission boards will require a resume or a CV, and you'll usually be interviewed, and that's sort of the introduction to them before you actually meet them face to face. And then the types of things that your audience wants to know from that resume also differ. So with your high school resume, you're trying to show that you're very involved, well-rounded. You're probably having a list of all the clubs and organizations that you've been involved in, any kind of part-time summer jobs. And sometimes there'll be a section for your interests, and then honors and awards that you may have received. So maybe you're in, some kind of an honor society or something, National Honor Society. Those types of things are on that high school resume. And then in college, your resume is going to look a little bit different. And when I show the example, you're going to see the way that you sort of capture your education. You're going to talk about relevant coursework. Sometimes when you're going for that first internship and you don't have any kind of experience in your background that is really, lending itself to that internship, you can use that relevant coursework section to show that, look at what I'm studying, and that really relates to this position that I'm applying for. You're going to have your work experience on there, internships, research. Some majors will be research focused. Any activities you're involved here at Stonehill, leadership, skills, relevant experience, and overall you're trying to show that you are a good fit for the opportunity that you are applying for. So if you look at this example of a very simplistic resume that is coming in from a first-year student, there are some things on here that definitely need to change. And I think what I'm going to do is just sort of go through them with you, because normally if we had a big group or we were doing this in person, we would be kind of asking for you guys to jump in. But I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to go through some of the things that Jack might want to improve here. So the first thing is a photo. You really do not need a photo in your resume. That is, that belongs on LinkedIn, and in Handshake, there's a spot for you to have a profile photo. So it actually takes up a lot of room too. So you do not need a photo. Jack's email address, if you look at that, soccerstar25@gmail, not very professional. They probably had that since he was in, 7th grade or something, and he got his first email. So you want to change that to something more professional. So definitely using your Stonehill email would be a good bet. And then when students are seniors, we recommend that you go back to a Gmail and something very simple, either, your first initial and last name, that type of thing, but something more professional. He has a section here for interests, and honestly, that is something that you used to see on resumes a lot. And some of the templates that you may find on, looking through Word and online, they might still have that on there. And that's really not something that, you really need to focus in on. There's some missing categories here. So the categories that he has are interest, skills, work, and activities. Well, we don't know where he goes to school, so he's missing an education section. He probably would want to put relevant coursework in there. So, categories can change around too based on what you're applying for. He doesn't have the organizations and the titles. So, he's a soccer captain, but where? So what was the name of his school? What city and state was that in? He has chorus. I don't know if that's from his high school or if he was in some community chorus or another group. So you have to be more specific and give lots of detail. There's no dates here, so we don't know if he still works at Applebee's. We don't know if he currently still babysits or he did that 2 years ago. So you want to have dates. And he should have bullet points for his descriptions of what he was doing. So for instance, at Applebee's, and he's only got one, kind of statement there where I'm sure he did a lot more than that as a service. So he could put a little bit more detail into, what is probably his idea of a bullet point, but he could probably improve that. And he's also using personal pronouns. So on your resume, you don't want to use personal pronouns. And we'll talk about that when we look at the example. Do you guys have any questions at this point?
Nope. Everything's good so far.
All right.
Good, thank you.
All right, awesome. So, I'm forgetting, he does not have a skills section there. So we also don't know if he has any skills relating to technology, or maybe he speaks another language, or, he has some kind of a special certification. So you definitely want to include that section. And then this is, this is probably a little small, but I think you can get the general idea of, this is our sample resume that we use and hand out to students when they're trying to put together that first resume, or even to take your current resume and try to put it in a more organized format. So you can see that this heading has an email and cell phone number. It has a town and the state. We found that people are getting away from putting the whole address there. You used to see, your address with city, state. Another option is to just say, I'm just going to have my email and my phone number, because who's going to really send me a letter anymore in the mail? This is probably all going to be through email or through me submitting this resume on some kind of an online platform. And then education is the first section, because this is what you're involved in right now. You are currently a student. So this is how we have set it up, and you don't have to use this exact format with the lines and everything. You can just underline the words in your headings and center them. I mean, it's a personal style, but this is just a good starting off point. It's clean, it's neat, it's easy to read. So you can see that the student has Stonehill College and then their anticipated graduation date. And then the next line is this student happens to be a psychology major, so they're a candidate for a Bachelor of Arts degree. If they were a business major, it would be candidate for Bachelor of Science and Business Administration. If they were a science major, it would be a candidate for Bachelor of Science. Then they have their major listed there. This person happens to have a minor, and then they have their GPA there. Now, we recommend putting your GPA on the resume if it's 3.0 or above. They also have listed some awards that they, are a Moreau Honors Scholar. They have been on the Dean's List 4 semesters. This person, you can tell, also has studied abroad. So that's how they have captured the study abroad experience. I want to note, if you are a first-year student, you don't need to put your high school on there. You're at Stonehill now, you're in college, so you're just going to have Stonehill there. Relevant coursework, I talked about that before, about how it's a good idea to have a sampling. You don't have to put every single course that you've taken, but a sampling of courses that you think the prospective employer would, think, wow, that's great. This is something that I feel like relates to the position the student is applying for. Then we go into their work experience, and you'll notice that the two things that the student has listed, they are listed in reverse chronological order. So the most recent thing goes first, and then you work backwards. So we can see that they are currently, they're working in the CWAA as a tutor in the subject matter of psychology, and then they're also highlighting a hospitality position that they have working as a busser. And you'll notice that it says seasonally, May 2015 to present. That means that the student works there on breaks or in the summer. You don't want to mislead somebody by saying, May 2015 to present, because that sounds like you do it all the time, right? That you're still doing it. So that seasonally can quantify what you're doing. Then the student has leadership experience, so they're involved with ABS, and they're also in the Stonehill Skyhawk Leadership Academy. You can see that the ABS is listed first because they are currently involved in that, so that is the most recent. Then they have a volunteer experience category, and in both categories you can see that they've kept the formatting the same. So they're bolding the name of the organization or the club or the employer, and then they have the location, unbolded, and then they have their dates. So they have the VFW, and they have the Children's Museum, and then we go into collegiate activities. The skills section on the bottom, I had talked about the fact that Jack was missing that. So these are going to be hard skills, not soft skills. So a lot of times we'll see students put in the skills section, good listener, great communicator, team player, right? You don't need to do that in a skills section. The way to get across the fact that you are a team player is within your bullet points. So if you're really descriptive in your bullet points, for instance, if it's communication skills, well, I can tell that, as a tutor in the Writing Center, you certainly are communicating with students all the time, working with them one-on-one, but also as a busser in the restaurant position, you are dealing with your coworkers, you're dealing with customers, you're providing great customer service. So you don't have to list those soft skills, even though, as I said, you might see that on some examples. All of your bullet points need to start with an action verb, and they should be in the proper tense. So if you are still doing something at the present time, like for instance the writing tutor position, they all are in the present tense, those verbs that started off. So instruct students, identify specific problems. But you'll notice if something happened in the past, like the Stonehill Leadership Academy, the Skyhawk Leadership, it's selected by participated in, so that's in the past. The other thing I want to point out about the dates is you'll notice that formatting-wise, they are all lined up to, hit the end of that margin, or in this case, because the student has the underlining, they're coming to the end of that. So you want that to be nice and uniform as well. There's no personal pronouns in here. In all the bullet points, they're not talking about themselves, saying, I instruct students, I identify. You're just taking those out of the picture. When you're putting together your bullet points, also you want to talk about, what you're doing, why you were doing it, what kind of value does it bring to the employer, to the company, or maybe what is its impact if you're volunteering. Maybe you're describing what types of things you are involved in doing for the community. So we can bear that in mind when you think about putting together those bullet points. Okay, so when it comes to bullet point writing, here's a great example of, somebody saying just simply trained employees. If you go back and you think about what you're doing working in that retail situation, and maybe you're sort of that go-to person, and you trained 20 employees on all the policies and procedures. You also supervised staff, and you made sure that they were providing, that quality, superior customer service, right? So don't sell yourself short and just have these very short little bullet points, when if you think about what you're really doing there, you can kind of give the viewer of your resume an idea of, how trusted you were by the employer. Wow, you must be one of their top performers if they want you to train everybody else. So we can definitely help you with that when you have, got your basic bullet points down and you're thinking, I really need to develop these a little bit more. That's where we can come in and help you during a resume lab situation. So I'm going to take you to Handshake and show you where some of those resources are. So definitely there's a copy of the sample resume that we just looked at in there. And if you were about to create your own, you can take that sample resume and decide, which ones you're going to include at this point. Maybe you don't have leadership. That's okay. You're going to be putting in other types of headings. There's one thing you can actually do in some instances where you have relevant work experience or just relevant experience in general as it relates to the internship or the job you're applying for. And you can kind of bring that to the top so that it's one of the first things that I'm going to see when I read it, and then follow it up with other work experience. So there's a lot of different decisions you can make around how you're going to utilize those categories. If you're applying for a student leadership position, obviously, if you have leadership, you want that to be on the top. So maybe you're leading with leadership and then going into work experience. I hope that makes sense. So first of all, before you go to a resume lab, I would really recommend that you use the documents that I'm going to show you to put together a first draft. And then that way, we're going in and looking at it with you and really fine-tuning it and helping you to get those bullet points the best they can be. And we can be asking you questions, tell me more about what you were doing in this job. So it's really great to come to the resume lab with something, okay? And once you have attended resume labs and you feel like it's set and ready to go, you want to upload that to Handshake and get it approved, because that way when you see something, your resume is not going to be in the pending bin or, being sent back because you need to make changes, right? So a lot of times if you're attending a resume lab and you're getting a couple of, changes made, we can help you upload it and get it approved on the spot so, you're ready for that experience that you are applying for. So let me just kind of stop that share for a sec, and I want to go to my other screen so I can get into Handshake. And I just want to show you in your profile in Handshake. Can you guys, am I in Handshake? I just want to make sure you can see it.
You're good.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, great. So in your profile here under the Career Center, all right, sorry about that. So this is what you should see, okay? When you scroll down to resources, we have a whole section down here on resumes. There's lots of other great information in here too. But I just want to show you the sample resume is in there. We've already looked at that. But then there is a resume overview that gives you some great tips as you're starting out. And one of the things that I didn't mention earlier on is we talked a little bit about templates. They might look fancy and, you know, oh, this is easy, I just plug in the information. We really recommend you just start with a blank Word document. So much easier, because when you start trying to move things around in some of those templates, it can be really frustrating. So starting just in Microsoft Word, making sure that your margins and everything are, you know, standard. This gives you some good tips in terms of additional types of categories that you could include if you needed to. So definitely take advantage of that. Then we have the action words and bullet points. We talked about how your bullet points need to start off with a strong action verb. And this list comes in so handy because sometimes, you definitely want to change up those bullet points. You don't want them all to start, assisted, collaborated. You want to think of different ways that you can say something. So we've broken it down into, some technical skills, some financial skills. So if you're a business major, maybe you're talking about, calculating things, forecasting things. If you are in maybe, the teaching field, you want to think about different ways that you can talk about helping those students out. So you are explaining, facilitating, instructing. This is going to be so helpful to you when you're trying to change those up. And then this gives you some good examples of what we talked about earlier in terms of, trying to get those bullet points to be really fully developed, right? So, in these examples, somebody's saying, well, I worked at the cash register. Well, okay, but it's more than that, right? So when you do a little bit of work on it and think about what types of things you're doing around that, sales transaction, it sounds a lot better to say managed cash and credit sales transactions for customer purchases utilizing a point of sale system, right? So I think you'll find that useful as well. And then we also have a great one if you are somebody who is more advanced and you have a resume but you want to keep improving it. This one that's called editing your resume is a great checklist to go through to make sure that you are kind of meeting all of these formatting, recommendations here. I want to open up to see if you have any questions. I've done a lot of talking here, and I'm wondering if you have any specific questions around the resumes that you're working on, that other people in the group might also have that same question. I think you guys should all be able to just unmute if you have a question.
I think everything's been clear so far. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And one thing I also want to mention too is there are certain unique things that are included for certain majors. So for business majors, I think we also have a sheet in here too that's like unique sections. Sometimes you need to include something that talks about your plans to, if you want to be a CPA and things like that, you have to include a plan to complete your hours. And we have all of that. So again, that's a good thing for a resume lab question. So I would suggest, taking a try at it if this is your first time around, and then looking for resume labs within the event section in Handshake. and popping in to have one of us review it for you. Sometimes people, come back a couple of different times. They'll get some feedback, make those changes, come back another day to have it finalized, and then get it uploaded to Handshake. Does anyone have any questions about uploading the resume into Handshake?
Yes, I'm unsure how to do that.
Okay, so that is also right here in underneath your profile picture. Can you guys still see me?
Yes.
Okay, so then all you do is click on Documents and then add a new document. So you can either drag and drop it from, like if you had it on your desktop, you can drag and drop it, or you can just look for the file. And then what happens is that resume is going to go into a pending bin, and somebody in our office looks at those resumes every day. And if we feel like you need to make some changes, we'll mark it as require changes and ask you to come to a resume lab. But I would say if you feel confident and you can check all the boxes in terms of things that you're including on that resume, you might want to go ahead and upload it and see what happens. Maybe it does get approved right away. And then one other thing I want to mention about that too is that when you are uploading, if you're applying for a position, you can see that there's spaces here for all these different documents. This is just my sample one, so I don't have a bunch of things in here. But if this was a student who had applied for a number of different positions, maybe you're calling that resume, work study position, and another one is called, Eastern Bank, and then different cover letters, right? So when you go to upload, when you're applying for a position, you can just go in and grab the document that you want. Maybe your transcripts are already here and ready in case you need them for an opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes. While we're actually on this page, what exactly is a cover letter?
So cover letters, we have, funny you ask, we have that in our document section there too. So we recommend that you include a cover letter if they are providing that space for it. So again, if you're applying, sometimes there'll only be room for one document. Maybe they just want a resume. But if they allow you to upload a cover letter, it's a great thing to do, because this is your opportunity to talk a little bit more about how you heard about the position, why you would be a good fit. You can hone in on something that was on your resume, but you couldn't go into as much detail because you were trying to stay on that one page, because we do recommend a one-page resume. So yeah, a cover letter is something that is just another thing that you can do to go above and beyond if it's not required. A lot of employers will require it, and it's a good writing sample. It's a chance for you to make your case, and it's also showing your communication skills, your writing skills.
Thank you.
Sure. And, one thing I think I forgot to mention, which is important for those of you who did say that you were first-year students, if you're looking at the resume and you're thinking about collegiate activities, well, maybe you haven't had a chance to join anything here yet. As a first-year student, you can have a category that's extracurricular activities, and then you could list the clubs and organizations, but just making sure that you also include the name of your high school and the city-state when you are, putting that down as an experience. And that way, you can show what you've been involved in up to this date, with the thought that probably by the second semester of your sophomore year, you're going to start to take those high school experiences off because you've been involved in other things in college. So, anybody else? Any other questions? Right. Well, I think we're good. Thank you very much for participating today, and I hope that we'll see you in some resume labs. And I hope that this will be a good jumping off point for you to get started if you haven't attempted it. And if you're trying to polish your resume, I hope you can get some good tips from some of those resources that we shared.
There
right.
is a resume lab later today, correct?
Yeah, well, you know what? We can actually look right now in the events section. I can show you. So, career development lab, let's see, what time is that going to be? All right, 2:30. So 2:30 to 4:30, and obviously everything is virtual for now. But we look forward to next semester when maybe we can have some in-person resume labs. Wouldn't that be wonderful? All right. So thank you very much, and as I said, we hope to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.